So what I'd like to do today, before we get too far away from the Feast of Tabernacles, I'd like to just ask a question. I think there's an object lesson there for us. Did we do as it instructed in Deuteronomy 14, did we really do our heart's desires? Did we fill ourselves with the things that our heart really wanted? Did we satiate ourselves with our heart's desires? Did we come back full, just completely filled up with, wow, I've gotten everything I really wanted. This was great. You know, as we go here, let's make one thing really clear. When the Bible talks about heart, when I'm talking about heart, we're not meaning the organ inside of us that's pumping blood. We mean something far more than that. Easton's Bible Dictionary says this: according to the Bible, by the heart one is determined to be pure, foolish, wise, upright, righteous. In other words, what a man is determined by the condition of his heart. The International Standard Bible Impedia says this about heart: as representing the man himself, it was considered to be the seat of emotion and passion and appetites, the intellectual and moral faculties. It's the sum total of what we are, how we're bent, what we are. So when we talk about heart, that's what we're talking about. And today I want to talk about matters of the heart. So maybe we should ask ourselves a different question. Rather than ask, did we fill ourselves with our heart's desires? This might be more penetrating. Let's ask ourselves, what did our hearts desire? What was it that we really, really were looking forward to? What was it that we were longing for? All right? What did we most look forward to when we went to the feast? Was it having a fillet of beef? Or it was getting it? Or were we just really deep down hoping for a very deep, penetrating Bible study that illuminated God's Word? Were we desiring physical food or spiritual food? What was it that we were really looking for? What was it during the feast that we spent our money? We had more money than we normally have. What was it that we spent our time on? We had the most time that we normally have, free to do with whatever we wanted. What was it that we desired? What was it that we were longing for? And by our actions, what does this tell us about how we spent our time, how we spent our money? What were our desires? What were our desires? And it's from this perspective that I actually think that the Feast of Tabernacles is sort of like a pop quiz on our heart. See, God is very clever. He wants us to enjoy things, but by telling us to go and get and do what your heart desires, we then can look back at it and it reveals what our hearts are. It reveals the sum total of where we're bent at this point in time. It's not a fixed thing, but it does show us something there. From that perspective, I ask myself, am I more physically minded or spiritually minded? Right? The fruits are the fruits, right? Notice in Jeremiah 17. In Jeremiah 17, verse 9, here's what God says about our hearts, and notice what he says he's doing to them. In Jeremiah 17 and in verse 9, it says, the heart is deceitfully wicked. Who can know it? Oh, yes, I'm getting older, so I need the light. Thank you. All right, so he says, the heart is deceitfully wicked and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the conscience, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his own doing. This is very illuminating. Here we realize that man doesn't have a good heart. We are not inherently good. We are actually anti-God. Our hearts, all of our hearts, are anti-God. When we look out there, we might see someone think, oh, they're really nice people. But our hearts, man's heart, is not bent toward God. It's bent the wrong way. Now, you and I, God calls us out. We become converted. We get baptized, have the laying on the hands. The Holy Spirit is given. Our heart now is 99% carnal against God, and it's 1% for God. So we got to look at this heart, and he says, who can know it? This is a difficult thing to truly know what is the condition of my heart. What am I really deep down inside? What is it? It's easy to look it over. It's hidden most of the time. We protect it. We guard it. We don't like to look inside of there. And God is saying, you need to do this. And in fact, I am searching your heart. I am looking at it. What is it made of? Where is it bent? And when he says he tries it, he tests it. This is like an engineer that's taking a prototype and he's doing a test drive to see how well does it work. Now, in speaking, they say, always know your audience. So for your computer guys, this is sort of like a beta test. They want to see, is it behaving the way it should? Is it really where it needs to be, or are there tweaks that need to happen to it? All right, so this is not a negative thing. God is not trying to catch us, but he wants us just to see where are we off, what things still need to be done. So God is in this active process of testing us, proving us, all right? So this is very interesting because now let's go to 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 17. 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 17, you probably know what this says, right? So it says, for now is the time has come that judgment must begin on the household of God. For if it first begin with us, what shall the end of them that be that do not believe in the gospel of God? See, God is judging our hearts. That's your heart and my heart right now. We are in this process. God's taking us for these test drives to see what's really in there. When there's pressure, when there's freedom, when you're giving freedom, when you're given power, money, all the things that we're going to really have when we're made spirit beings. He wants to give us a little taste. How will we handle it? What will come out of our hearts? All right? God tells us that a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. So when we see the fruits of how we lived at the feast, the things we desired, this in reverse is giving us an idea of the condition of our heart. And if you're like me, there's some good and there's some not so good. There's things that need a little attention. And that's why God's giving us this benefit of living now, these test drives, so that we have the chance to see what's wrong, to judge ourselves, to see what do we need to change to become more right with God. All right? So God is clear about how we are to treat our hearts and why. See, God gives us very specific things of what to do. Go to Proverbs verse 4. In Proverbs verse 4, we're going to see what God tells us. And he's going to give instructions about what we're supposed to do. All right, Proverbs 4. All right, we're going to start in verse 23. Okay, Proverbs 4 and verse 23, God says, keep your heart with all diligence, and for out of it are the issues of life. So that's a very succinct, easy to understand scripture. So what does the word keep mean? It means to preserve or guard from harm. All right? All right? That's what it means. And so what does diligent means? Diligent means it's kind of like one would guard a prison. Boy, you're going to be on guard. You're going to be very careful about everything that goes in and everything that goes out. You don't want to let anything dangerous get in. If you let knives get in, then prisoners can get stabbed, guards can get stabbed. You're going to control. You're going to look at the media. You're going to look at cell phone calls. You're going to look at written correspondence. You want to control what's going in and out. So he's saying when it comes to your heart, you need to guard this thing, protect it from harm, control what goes in and what goes out. You want to be very, very careful. And it says, why? He says, because from there are the issues of life. God is very clearly saying our hearts are a matter of life and death. Our future depends on the quality of our heart. You know, in my line of work, I'm required by law to collect the net worth of people. And we have to add up things like what's your land worth, what's your retirement account's worth, all of this stuff. And that is what we say is a net worth. All right? That's how man thinks. God, when he says, what's the net worth of you or me or anyone? He doesn't look at any of that. He's solely saying, what's the condition of a heart? That is how he's determining your net worth. He's determining, are you holy or not? Are you one of his children or are one of Satan's children? It's all depending on the quality of our hearts. So we have to really guard it. We have to protect it. All right? Because from there that is what's going to determine life or not. You know, it's interesting, the Pharisees had this 100% backward, right? They focus on, how did I tithe? And did I keep the Sabbath? And sundown is 1 minute. Okay, we can go over here. They were so worried about this, but they were never worried about their heart. They were so worried about paying tithes, and they would get all these mustard seeds and get a razor blade and separate them. They might spend hours trying to separate that. And God says, man, you guys are blind guides. You are so ignorant, you don't even have the first clue about your true condition. You are so far from righteous that it's not even funny. You've missed the whole intent of the law. You haven't looked at your hearts. You're not generous. You're not kind. You're trying to just do the bare minimum. When God says, be generous, go above and beyond. Don't you love me? Don't you understand? I own everything, and I let you have 80% of it. This is crazy. Why are you picking at this? They never focused on their hearts. What we need to do is focus on our hearts. What's the content? What's the character of our hearts? Does it look like God's? You know, my daughter got married, and I just can't seem to shake this idea that I said yes to her getting married because I thought they were equally yoked. I thought they had the same value systems. They had the same God, the same person that they were trying to emulate. How in the world could God the Father let you or I marry Jesus Christ if our heart is vastly different? If he's full of love and outgoing concern, how can he not only have people with the same type of heart get married? We have to have that same godly heart. The divine nature, the Bible calls it. It's what we have to partake of, that divine nature. Okay? So this is very fundamental. And it's easy to make something that's important like this never go to the top of the heap. There's a million other things to do and study and watch, and they might be good. But I don't know of anything that's more valuable. If this were a sermon, we could look at 20 or 30 verses about King David, and you would find out the number one theme in his life was he wanted to make his heart like God. That's why God said it in such plain English, sometimes we miss the meaning. I have found David, a man after my own heart. The number one thing he desired, the number one theme of his life was, I want to be like God on the inside. That was his number one thing. He is the exact opposite of the Pharisees. Did the Pharisees keep the law better than King David? Yes. Did that matter to God? No, because their hearts were nowhere near it. And at the end of 10, 20, 30, 40 years, they were no more like God than when they started. But King David, despite his gigantic flub-ups, 10, 20, 30 years later, he was vastly different. And he now was keeping the law far better than they were, and he was keeping it from his heart. These are the things we want to do. I want to shift gears just a bit because I want to talk about what our number one priority in raising kids should be. And notice what God was impressed with. In 1 Kings 3, we find something that happens, right? In 1 Kings 3, here, God asked Solomon a question. And in 1 Kings 3, and we're going to start in verse 7. Now, the Lord my God, let's see, 3 verse 7. Let's see if I got this right. All right, I get it right here. All right, sorry about that. So God says, ask, and so in verse 5 he says, what shall I give you? Ask anything that you want and tell me what it is, and I'm going to give it to you. So in verse 7, here's what Solomon says. He says, now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I am but a little child, and I know not how to go out or to come in. And thy servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people who cannot be numbered or counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern good from bad, right from wrong, good from evil. For who is able to judge or make righteous judgment for these people? So this is interesting. At a time that Solomon is a little kid, all right, he's a little child, what does he ask for? He asks for an understanding heart. He asked for something of a heart, something that makes him godly inside. That's shocking. God took notice. He said, wow, I am so impressed with this. I'm going to give you all of that, and I'm going to give you riches, honors, and glory. Here is a kid that had a mindset. His heart was already bent to think of the things of the heart. He asked for, at a young age, something of great value, eternal value. God was impressed with that. He chose to improve his heart. He chose to do something that would benefit God's people. He wasn't thinking of himself. He was thinking of other people. That's an amazing thing. Wouldn't you be proud if you had a child like that? Here's the candy store. Have everything you want. What is your heart's desire? Here's a little kid saying, I'd sure like to have a heart like yours so I could serve your people well. I would love to have a child like that. My heart would be doing this, right? Wow, I'm so proud. Look at this child. I can't believe she came from me, right? So this is interesting. This is an amazing example. Now, let's go back to Proverbs 4, because I think I can tell you why Solomon asked for that. Why didn't he ask for something different? Why didn't he ask for strength? Why didn't he ask for, let me live a long time or let my kingdom be great? He didn't do that. And I think we can, from Scripture, easily see why. All right. I've got my Bible with the big print, so I don't know where everything is quite as well and as fast. So in Proverbs 4, we're going to see something very interesting. And we're going to start in verse 3. It says, all right, for I was my father's son. Now who is speaking? Solomon speaking. The wisest man ever to walk the planet, right? All right, at least up until Jesus Christ, all right? So the wisest man on the planet, he says, for I was my father's son, tender and only beloved in the sight of my mother. He taught me also, and he said unto me, let thy heart retain my words, keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom and get understanding. Forget it not, neither decline your words from my mouth. Forsake her not, and she shall preserve you. Love her and keep her, and she will keep you. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with your getting, get understanding. From the time that Solomon was young, King David constantly was focused on his heart. And he kept telling his son and embedding in his son's heart, desire the things of the heart, desire wisdom, desire understanding. You've got to know how God thinks. It has to be written on the inside. And what David did successfully was implant the weightier matters of the law into Solomon's heart, so that when he was tested, when he was taken for a test spin and God says, tell me what you want, he did what he was trained to do. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is older, he will not depart. He trained his son to desire matters of the heart. He trained his son to want something that wasn't physical, but something spiritual, something that was godly, something that had way more value. And he chose the better thing. And so, when Solomon was a young man, here's what he did. It was part of what David had embedded. It was part of the inheritance David had taken from his heart and put into his son's heart. It was a blessing that was transferred from one generation to the next. By what? Not by what David owned, not by how smart David was, but by the conditions of David's heart. It then got spread. Now, we don't have time, but if this was a sermon, we would go back and look at what God said about King David. Saul had been king for 40 years, and he says, I'm removing you, Saul. Your heart has never turned. You don't keep my laws. You have not changed. I've given you 40 years to test you, and you haven't improved. I am now replacing you with a son of Jesse, whom I found to be a man after my own heart. This is not talking about David when he's 40. This is talking about David when he is a teenager. I think it's a shame when we underestimate and set the bar too low for our youth. They can be highly converted. They can be having a great relationship with God. Their hearts can be amazing. We need to teach them from the time that they can comprehend that your heart needs to be bent toward God. I'm going to help you protect it. You have to protect your heart. Only let the good things in. Examine your heart. Get rid of the wrong things. Eventually, between you and God, me and God, we all have to have the law of God written in our heart. Everything else must be discarded. That is what is valuable. If we're going to save a generation, if we are going to truly love in the most powerful way our kids, as parents and as members in a church caring for these youth, this is the standard. It's not did they mess up. It's what's in their heart. You want to win the heart. If you win the heart, you'll win the child. The Catholics have a saying, give me a child until he's 8 and he'll be a Catholic for life. So we know what God's doing. God is busily searching our hearts. He is actively testing it to see what's inside of it. If we pay attention, if we look at the fruits of our life, the good fruit and the bad fruit, all of it, it gives us an indication of what's inside and what needs to be changed, what needs to be discarded. If we're alive, I figure Satan's got some strongholds inside of our heart. That means there's work to be done. But if we busily search our hearts, get rid of what's wrong, add what's right, by the time we get to the Passover, this examination process will not be painful. It will not be negative. It will be a time of joy because we will have done the work. If we look at the agricultural analogy, wintertime is a time for pruning. There's no better way to prune than to search our heart, get rid of what's bad, and put in what should be there. So that's what I'm going to focus on, and that's what I hope we all can focus on, because God is going to judge our hearts one way or the other.